In its entire history, Jaguar has never built a manual V8 car. However, this Jaguar specialist, Swallows Racing, has built a bunch of them. One of them from my past, and this one here. My story with manual XKRs weirdly started about 20 feet from here. Back in late 2022, Drive Tribe and Swallows combined to build one hell of a car. There was a car, an XKR, sitting right over there, and I saw it and thought, could that be a YouTube project? The whole story behind that car was that it was originally an American car. It was left-hand drive and was shipped to Miami to a customer. It was then bought by a member of the US military who got stationed in Japan, and he took the car with him. The US military had a deal that if you were stationed elsewhere, they would ship your car out to you. Now, Swallows imports Japanese Jaguars because they've not got a speck of rust on them, and that XKR was one of those cars. It got imported from Japan and was sitting just over there, ready to become a race car. I then stuck my hand up and said, any chance we can have that car and turn it into a bit of a YouTube project? And we cracked on, with the main aim being to manual swap the XKR. Swallows built one hell of a motor, just over there in the old race workshop that's now the detailing bay. I have never known a car be more transformed from one single modification. The Swallows guys took an elderly man's GT Cruiser and turned it into a proper country road performance car simply by one of these having a stick and 3 pedals. It smited other YouTube Jags, Richard Hammond loved it, and even the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust signed off the build. This X100 is actually a slight step up from the Drive Tribe car because that was a 4 litre, this is a 4.2. That means 400 horsepower from factory, up from the 4 litres 370. And this one's been tuned up thanks to some standalone trickery up to 450 horsepower. This one is also for sale right now on the Swallows website. We'll put a link to it in the description below. You can buy it. Cracking motor. This is the important bit. That is a gear stick connected to a 6-speed manual gearbox. The gear stick in the Drive Tribe car was a big chunky thing. It was quite nice to use. This one is a custom job made to look like an original E-Type. Lovely. To help deal with the new speeds this car will be doing, this has got Yokohama performance tyres on 20-inch Detroit alloy wheels, and in there's a big Brembo brake kit with upgraded Tarox discs and pads. Jaguar never made a manual V8 car from factory. The story goes that because Ford owned both Jaguar and Aston Martin, Ford allowed Aston to have the manual DB7, but Jaguar had to stick with the auto. However, Jaguar did make one prototype called the XKRR that had a manual gearbox, although I've looked at that car up close, up on a ramp, and I must say, I think Swallows did a much better job with that Drive Tribe car. It was much better put together and much more complete to build. Let's take this one out and see how it compares. The Drive Tribe car actually started as 290 horsepower. It was a little bit worse for wear when we first got to it, but we then rescued back its stock horsepower, so back to 370, and then tuned it at the tuning shed, PV Engineering, up to 420 horsepower. So with that 4 litre car, we added on 50 horsepower, and the same thing has happened with this. So this must be running a very similar tune to go from 400 to 450. That puts these X100s right on par, if not a bit more power than a 911 Turbo of their era. That's what these things were sadly compared against back in the day in all the motoring magazines. It was always XKR versus 911. If us Jag folk were lucky, it would be put up against a Carrera S, but it was more often put up against stuff like a 911 Turbo, and it would get annihilated. Those 911s drove a hell of a lot better, they had more power. It wasn't really a match-up at all. They were proper sports cars, and these were much more GT. But by putting in a manual gearbox into one of these, you get rid of a ridiculously heavy torque converter. When we converted ours, I remember lifting up and thinking, my God, how much horsepower does it take to just get this torque converter turning in those old J-gate automatics? So this manual gearbox with a nice light flywheel takes way less horsepower for the engine to spin up, and it releases so much more grunt. An X100 is a proper Jag, but this thing is another level. It's a complete animal of a car. By going manual and adding that much more horsepower, it turns these X100s into proper muscle cars. It's not a sports car, it's a muscly performance car. The project car before our X100 was an E61 M5 Touring, and that was a similar job. We manual swapped that car as well. But the manual swap in the Jag transformed the car so much more than that BMW. It's amazing how much those automatic gearboxes held back the X100. So if you have an X100 and you've got very used to it, you smoke about in it, but you want a bit more pep and just a bit more of an event when you drive it, I can thoroughly recommend a Swallows manual swap. Oh, those sport cats as well. This whole concoction is a real winner. The gearbox in this car is a lot tighter than I remember the drivetrain one being. There you go on a bit straight road. Give it the beans. The traction control lights all over the place. Properly quick car. Oh, the Jag V8 is so good. People say the 4.2 is the pick of the bunch. That happy medium between the 4 litre and the 5 litre. I think I'm starting to agree. If you are used to driving your X100 nice and smooth around the countryside, a manual swap will be a bit of a bolt of lightning for you. You have to properly drive this car now. It's not one that you smooth around, going from corner to corner nice and gently on your way to a picnic. This is a bit of a riot now. Remember guys, this car is for sale, so if you fancy a Jag that you have to have a bit of a fist fight with, that gets the blood pumping, click the link down below, have a look, maybe drop a deposit down. Could a manual XKR take on a 911 Turbo 996 now? It's got it in terms of power, in terms of agility, probably not, but I can tell you in terms of fun, this would have the 911 licked because of that. To explain exactly how much work has gone into these manual conversions, I grabbed Swallows boss man Tom for a chat. Tom, you guys are becoming the go-to if you want to manual swap an XKR. How many of these have you done?
So in this spec, we've done about 4, but there's quite a lot of variation. So we've done about 15 of the actual flywheels to suit that gearbox. Lots of those have gone to sort of race builds, a big variation. Quite a lot of the guys use these engines in like Comp Safari, like 4x4 applications where they'll use that gearbox with a clutch and flywheel assembly. Okay. But we have got a waiting list for these at the moment. We've got about 10 on that list, and we're trying to get it to a point where we can obviously build a batch and then phase in the build of these projects.
Wow, okay, so there is some pretty serious demand for manual swapping XKs then?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's obviously they never made the manual, so I think lots of people kind of want that raw drive, and the manual is exactly what that gives you. Yeah. Of course, it's not for everyone. We do spend a lot of time consulting with people and talking about the disadvantages as well as the advantages, because ultimately they are a Grand Tourer, so it's verging, as we discussed earlier, on the aggressive side, if that makes sense.
That's it. Like if you start with an X100 and like you're kind of happy with how it drives, but you want a bit more, arguably this is too much. It's a pretty savage car once you're finished with it.
Yeah, it surprises a lot of people because obviously V8 supercharged, obviously unleashes a lot more power to the rear wheels because of the difference in the losses with the gearbox. And yeah, exactly as you said, it completely transforms the drive of the car.
Okay, and you guys will have completely stripped one of these apart and from first principles figured out how to manual swap it. What have been the main challenges right from that day one to getting a car like this?
So to be honest with you, initially on the outside it seemed quite a simple project. So the ZF 6-speed manual which we use, mates straight to the V8. So there's no adapter plate, it fits directly to it. So in theory, the mechanical side, to put a manual gearbox in this, is really straightforward. But the biggest challenges we had is once we did that, was the integration with the original electronics on the car. So this is a 2005 model, so the last of them, and there was quite a lot of variations in the X100. They changed essentially 3 times.
Yeah.
And where we're having issues is getting the original OEM ECU to work with a manual, because it was never designed at factory to do that. So the first plan was to try and make that work, being the most cost-effective route. We just really struggled with that, to be honest with you. There was no kind of engineers out there that we could find to be able to do that at the time. So we went down the route of going standalone with the engine ECU, and that was the biggest challenge overall, was the engine ECU ultimately. So the first kind of test mule was piggyback, where we kept the original ECU in place, used a standalone to run the engine, which got us over the issue. But we really wanted this to be as OEM as possible, which that didn't offer. So we then went through the task of essentially removing the factory ECU completely and just running it solely on a max race standalone ECU. Which that again also sounds quite simple, but because of the CAN network and all the other kind of components that we forget about, we had to fully integrate that into the car. So you've got, for example, like your instrument cluster, all of that's on the CAN network. This is fully functional and working with our standalone. For example, your steering wheel buttons, your aircon, your cruise control, we've managed to get all of that working and communicating.
So manual X100s now exist. What about X150s? Is that possible? Because same engine, right? 4.2.
Yeah, absolutely. So same again, the mechanical, really straightforward, fits straight on the bell housing. 4.2s, slight difference with VVT, but generally identical. We have actually done an X150, which is in one of our Palmer XKRs, so it's a track focus car.
Cool.
The same kind of problem we had with the X100 is that we're having issues communicating with the rest of the car. So being the next generation again, there's a lot more CAN network and everything runs over the CAN on the X150. So integrating the fully standalone ECU to get the ABS, traction, all that working is a much bigger challenge. So we are quite far into it, and we have, like I said, it's functioning, it drives, but we do have a few lights on the dashboard. So we're working our way through that. So the answer is yes, it is possible, but it's not ready yet.
Okay, fair enough. So the X100 manual is a thing. What would you say would be the ultimate X100 build? You've got a lot of parts literally next door in the smallest parts department. How much can you throw at one of these?
Well, there's a couple of directions you can go. Obviously, this one's supercharged. So if you were going to go the supercharged route with the manual, that would be obviously top of the list for me, being the fact that I want that raw driving experience. I would go down the route of looking at suspension. We do obviously coilover kits for these with Avo, which massively improves the drive, road holding from a performance perspective. And then brakes, I would go with a Tarox brake upgrade as well on the front.
Basically the drive-type car currently.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that when we obviously discussed that build, that was pretty much the perfect spec. Obviously, we do some of the pulleys as well to gain a bit of performance. And the same with that car, that was controlled with a max ECU, so it unlocked a load of tuning potential for us, which, just to go back on, the original ECU is practically untunable, so there's very little we can do, but when you go over to the max, there's a lot you can do.
That's very, really cool. And I guess we're talking ultimate X100s, like currently on the racetrack, Swallows is kicking ass with a manual X100.
Absolutely.
How much different is that compared to, say, this road car?
Well, yeah, well, that's something I was going to say. So the 4.2 NA is actually potentially one of the ones I would choose to do if it was my choice on the ultimate build. As you're talking with the XK, it's a car that my brother races. We've developed that hugely. It went back to a shell. I mean, in regards to suspension pickup points, all the same as a standard road-going X100. We just change a lot of the materials, if that makes sense. So we get rid of any rubber component. Lots of it's solid. From an engine perspective, that's a 4.2 NA with the same gearbox. We use slightly different diff ratios. But ultimately, we've developed a set of cams, cylinder heads, and we now have worked on the bottom end, and we've done pistons and rods. So we've got it to rev to sort of 7,500 RPM.
Would that work on the road, or is
probably
that
too extreme?
Spicy?
But I think there could be a perfect middle ground where you had sort of a nice set of heads and a road-going cam. Because we've got VVT on these, we can tame them down a little bit and give you the best of both. So for me, wanting that kind of raw NA experience with a manual gearbox, that's probably the direction I would go.
Interesting. Well, my dream 150 is a 4.2 NA.
Yeah.
So maybe that, plus once you've figured out the manual, that could be the dream little GT car.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, we're a long way into the X150. We've got the pedal box, all the shifters done. It's just the final kind of bits of CAN data that we're trying to piece together essentially, which I must stress isn't an easy task. It's one that we just keep making slight improvements every time we work on it essentially.
And you are working on another gearbox integration, not a manual,
Absolutely.
but another. What is the other project that you're working on?
So the other project that we're doing for the X100 is using the 8-speed ZF, which is used in the later 3-litre diesel XF. We're actually using a huge variety of cars. BMW use it in lots of applications.
Yeah.
And obviously the 4.2 generation X100 used the 6-speed ZF. So as we said earlier, the bell housing, all of that's the same. So it will literally fit straight in on an X100.
And at that point, are you talking paddle shift?
Absolutely.
Like with that later gearbox?
Yeah, we'll be able to give people the option. And because we've already integrated the Max ECU into this with a manual, the Max can control the ZF 8-speed. And that's given us a massive leapfrog again. So we'll be able to offer pretty much whatever the customer wants, whether they want really fast shifting paddles, they could have a sequential shifter if they wanted to. So we're in the process of finalising that as we speak.
The potential is huge, considering some people classify this as basically a reclothed XJS.
Yeah.
The potential you can take it to with mods like that is pretty extreme.
Oh, they're absolutely huge, and I think that the 8-speed would probably be a more popular conversion because it still gives you that GT driving experience, but if you wanted to, you can literally change the sport mode and drive it as if it is a manual essentially.
Okay, cool. Well, if you fancy any of that done to your car, come down to Swallows Racing. It's all happening here. It is scary how much potential can be unlocked from an X100 simply through a manual swap, and by the sounds of things, it won't be too much longer before there's such a thing as an 8-speed XKR kicking about, hopefully on this channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the Swallows Racing channel for more nerdy Jaguar content like this. I'll see you in the next one.